Good evening, Amber, and good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the Healthy Planet Garden of Life presentation on probiotics for digestive and immune health, a discussion with Amberlynn Vitale. Just to let you know a little bit about the webinar before we start, I am Wendy Hattie-Brown with Garden of Life Canada, and we very much appreciate you joining us this evening. All callers and joiners will be muted for the entirety of this presentation. If you have any questions for us, please do not hesitate to enter them into the Q&A section or the chat box, and we will do our best to answer them during the last 5 to 10 minutes of this presentation. This evening we have Amberlynn Vitale. She is a certified nutritionist in integrative nutrition and an Ayurvedic clinical consultant. Since early childhood, she has been fascinated with the power of food, herbs, and dietary supplements to optimize health. And after earning a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Russian, she went on to pursue this passion. Since 1996, she has both worked in product retail and maintained her own wellness practice, often working with doctors and holistic integrative medical professionals, promoting optimal health inside and out. Since 2010, she has reached a wider audience as a freelance content producer for several natural health publications, educating retailers and consumers alike on what quality really means in both food and supplements. Amber has been a member of the Garden of Life education team since 2014, continuing her mission by empowering extraordinary health. At this time, I'll hand it over to Amber.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much, Wendy. Wendy runs everything. She is extraordinary. And thank you to Healthy Planet for giving us this opportunity to talk about probiotics, to talk about digestive health. Digestive health is immune health. If you don't have a healthy digestive tract, you don't have a healthy immune system. You don't have a healthy anything, turns out. So we'll talk a little bit about the microbiome, about the digestive tract and the lining of the gut, what lives there, why it's important, and how we can best support that, both with diet and with supplementation. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am going to probably turn off my video just to make our connection a lot easier. Okay. So I hope by now all of you have heard the term the microbiome, or especially the human microbiome, but there is a microbiome everywhere, including in the atmosphere and in the oceans. But for us, we talk a lot about the digestive and gut microbiome because that is where the greatest number of organisms reside. But we have microbiota in our eyes, in our ears, in our nose, in our mouth, you know, on our skin. So it's really everywhere, in, on, and around us. In fact, interestingly, there's actually a new forensic science that can sample air in a room for a certain number of minutes after someone has been there and be able to link the DNA of their microbiome to that person. A little bit scary, right? So that should be a new interesting field that a lot of us could get into. But Dr. Perlmutter is somebody who partnered with us 2014, if I remember right, when I first started. And he has become an expert on the microbiome. He's also a board certified neurologist and has really been instrumental in creating a narrative about the microbiome that is really approachable for the layperson and for all of us to really understand. It gives us the heebie-jeebies a little bit when we think about things living in us and on us. But if we did not have them, we would not have an immune system and we would not have health in all aspects. And our world would not be what it is without microorganisms as well. So this is kind of the basis of understanding from which we launched this new line, the Dr. Formulated line, after we'd had quite a lot of success already in probiotics, because we knew the importance of what is in the soil, and we knew the importance of what is in our food, and we know the importance of what we get out of fermented products as well. And the research on the microbiome has brought us a lot of information, which has been fascinating and is ongoing. The first step study on the microbiomes and the Human Microbiome Project was supposed to just be for 5 years, and it has been ongoing because it just opened up a whole new world of understanding of health and of returning ourselves to health. So many things that microbes do, they protect against pathogens. So if you have a healthy microbiome, it's a question of numbers. It's a numbers game. If you have a lot more healthy, happy microbes that are producing things beneficial for your health, they will outcompete the bad ones. So even if you come across Salmonella or E. coli or Pseudomonas or something like that, if you have a strong, healthy microbiome, they are likely to outcompete it, and it won't ever take hold and create a disease or an illness in you. There are tons of metabolic functions in the soil. Microbes play a huge role in our bodies and on our bodies. They play a huge role. They metabolize, ideally, complex carbohydrates, but certainly can run on simple ones as well. They just don't make as many good products. They break down our bile, for example. If you have the right organisms, you will break down bile and clear out oxidized cholesterol. If you don't have the right microbes, they will not do that. They'll create a toxin instead, and that leads to heart disease, for example. So we want the not just beneficial microbes, but beneficial microbes that are fed the right food. And I can't emphasize that enough. They produce all kinds of postbiotics, so things that they make that are beneficial and instrumental in our body. Short chain fatty acids. They make B vitamins, for example. A pregnant woman's hormones change the kind of microbes she houses, and those microbes make folate if they get the right amount of fiber. So B vitamins, vitamin K2 out of K1 in the diet, hormones, making hormones, neurotransmitters, converting hormones, converting neurotransmitters. So many different aspects that they play a role in. We always knew that, at least 2/3 of your immune system was in the gut, but we kind of pinned it on the human immune tissue. And now we know that it is the microbes that live there as well. And that could be bacteria. That can also be fungi, yeast. It can even be, to a certain extent, protozoa. It can even be, things that we tend to think of as pathogenic when they become excessive, but in small amounts, they actually help the immune system learn what it is supposed to do. So a lot of our external health is dependent upon our gut. And so it's a problem these days because not that long ago, we all were in nature. We were living a natural life. We had our hands in the dirt. We ate off of the ground. We ate animals that ate out of the ground and were in stockyards. Our water was cleaner, free of toxins that would kill our microbiome. I think that's the point. There was dirty water. There was water that could be infected with a pathogen, but the water was not full of chemicals and heavy metals in most cases, and things that actually destroy a healthy microbiome. Antibiotics in our water supply, for example, all kinds of pharmaceuticals, hormones, all kinds of things. And today, we're faced with a much more dreary picture. There are so many things that inhibit a healthy microbiome. Stress is definitely one of them. You can do everything else right. If you're still stressing, you will have a leaky gut. You will have a damaged gut lining. We are facing, since the early 1980s, we have all in North America been exposed to glyphosate. It didn't just come about in '96 when GMOs came into being that were tolerant to glyphosate. It was already used as an antibiotic, as a chelating agent, and as a desiccant on crops. So it was common to do this with a plane and spray a crop even of wheat or barley or rye or navy beans or lentils, anything that isn't genetically modified but needs to be dried to be harvested, because it would be desiccated by that glyphosate and could be harvested. And that is why our food supply, our breads, our cereals, our pastas, everything is laced with glyphosate, and it's in the soil. So even if you go to grow something that's not genetically modified, for years, it will still be present in the soil. And then how our animals are raised is not typically a pretty picture. Any antibiotics in your food are going to affect your microbiome. I actually believe that a lot of the isolated laboratory synthetics and medications damage the microbiome because it's just not designed to receive things that way. It's designed to receive things in food. And so for all these reasons and more, our microbiome is not as diverse as it once was. It is not as robust as it once was in most cases. If you're born by a C-section, you're not exactly born with a sterile desert of a microbiome, but it is definitely not as diverse, nor is it as native as it would have been had you been born naturally, born vaginally. There are ways to kind of get around this, but nothing is obviously as inoculating as coming through the birth canal. Breastfeeding can make up for that a lot, but if a child is born by C-section and has to be formula fed, it is very, very difficult to get them the kind of diversity that they need to create a healthy and robust immune system that knows the difference between self and non-self. Our water, whatever it is treated with, is definitely causing damage in the microbiome. Our diet, hormones, all of the things that are used on our food and in our air and in our lawns, for example, in our gardens, any medications, excess alcohol, and alcohol at the wrong time. Alcohol on an empty stomach will absolutely destroy your microbiome. Alcohol with food, not as much. Alcohol the way it used to be back a long time ago when we first started fermenting things was in itself a probiotic. So the concept of kind of a new trend of sour beer is actually probiotic. Kombucha is actually probiotic. Wine used to be probiotic. Beer used to be probiotic. Cane sugar alcohol, the early corn alcohol, these things, until they went through a still, they actually were probiotic if the fermentation products were still in them. So it has changed with distilled alcohol that will actually, in excess, kill your microbiome. And then chronic high stress not only stresses the microbiome, but it actually causes your endocannabinoid system to excessively create excessive tone, and that creates a leaky gut. And that leaky gut leads to all kinds of immune dysregulation. And so our natural life, if we think about primal living, we would have pulled everything out of the dirt and just kind of wiped it off and gone for it, right? Just like I do in my garden. I'm out there, on my hands and knees, picking things up and eating them. I'm always conscious that I did water it out of the ditch, try not to pick things up when they're wet, but, I want to get my hands dirty. I want to eat things out of the soil. I want to have an interaction with the soil. But if we're picking up things out of our grocery stores, they've been typically cleaned, sprayed, washed down constantly with chlorinated, fluoridated water, right? In an agrarian society, to store food, there were no refrigerators, no freezers, so fermentation was the norm. And any bread or anything like that was always soaked, sprouted, and naturally fermented. And it was not just ground dry and mixed with water and adding some kind of laboratory produced yeast. So how we eat has changed tremendously. And in a short time, less than a century, it has changed tremendously. And it's most common for us all to have some form of dysbiosis rather than eubiosis. EU would mean normal. Biome, which can vary from region to region and culture to culture. There are cultures that eat more fruits. There are cultures that eat more root vegetables. There are cultures that eat more meat. There are cultures that eat more greens. And so that will definitely alter the microbiome. But for sure, a modern culture has absolutely been demonstrated to have a high preponderance of microbes that feast and feast and feast on your food and get more and more energy released from it because they're looking for nutrients, basically. They're digging through the trash, and as a result, the modern diet and the microbiome of the modern human in a processed food-laden society leads to higher calories available and leads to obesity and leads to a very different kind of a microbiome. So naturally, we would have sourced probiotics from fermented foods, from the soil, and from our birth process and the nursing process, and all of the people around us. I thank my stars every single day that as a young child, I was on a farm from about 1.5 to about 5. I lived on a farm and I was in the dirt because in my later years, I had a lot of problems with allergies. And I just think, gosh, if I hadn't lived on that farm, how bad would it have been? Because then we moved, things changed. That was the era when antibiotics were started to be given just, you know, in an insane, with a zero rationale, just like, oh, this new miracle thing called an antibiotic, let's just give it out, it'll fix everything. And most doctors didn't say take a probiotic in between, and even if they had, all we had was some, you know, Yoplait and some, you know, Lactobacillus acidophilus in 100 million CFUs. You know, nothing was what it is today, and society had really given up in the North American continent on fermentation products. So kefir, yogurt, kefir is great because it's a SCOBY. It's a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. So is kombucha, a SCOBY. You know, kimchi, fermented lactic acid cured meats even are probiotics. So these are the ways that we would naturally get our probiotics. And we have to feed them. We have to feed these probiotics. So if you're getting your probiotics from these natural sources like kimchi or sauerkraut, you're getting the fibers, right? You're getting the polyphenols, the antioxidants that feed these microbes as well. But in a world where we tend to supplement probiotics, we have to remember to feed them to really get the most out of them. Plants contain a couple kinds of fiber. Insoluble is like the scrubby Brillo pad. It sweeps the colon clean. And so it is important, and it does shorten transit time. I think we all realize that when we kind of recognize something on the other end that we ate, that it kind of cleaned us out. But the kind that really feeds your microbiome is called soluble. And it can become gelatinous. It may or may not, but it slows the emptying of the stomach and the transit of the digestive tract, not enough to make you constipated unless you were to not drink enough water, but it helps the microbiome to function optimally. And it can help to sweep, like I said, the bile out of the system, but it also feeds the microbes that recycle that. And it helps to nourish microbes that make the short chain fatty acids that are feeding your brain. And it helps to slow the release of sugar into the bloodstream. And that in turn helps with your insulin response. And so prebiotic fiber are indigestible to you, but are fermentable by the microbes. They get the energy from it. They get the calories. They get the functionality. You don't, so it doesn't really count as a carbohydrate that is giving you calories. Your microbes get the calorie and they get the energy from it. So it's important to know what kind of fiber you're getting. And most of us do not get enough soluble fiber, even on a healthy diet. It is kind of hard to do. Hadza are a hunter-gatherer tribe in Tanzania. They are known to take in as adults about 150 grams of fiber a day. That is an order of magnitude higher than most of us take in. And the, you know, recommended amount, at least in the US, is 25 grams a day. And that's just bare minimum. And it's hard for me to even get that. And I love a plate full of vegetables. You really have to pay attention to it. We don't eat nearly as many root vegetables anymore because we don't have to. This year with my garden, I'm harvesting all these root vegetables, and it's like they might not be my favorite food, but in the winter, that's what will be available. And they play a huge role in microbiome support. So certain foods where you can find lots of great prebiotic soluble fiber. Acacia gum is something that you probably don't access, but it is something that is used throughout Africa, and it is something that is great in a supplement form. Some people grow chicory. I have tons of chicory root out here. It looks like a weed, but I could certainly harvest it and grind it up and add it to things. Jerusalem artichoke, excellent source of fiber. These both are made into inulin, which is a supplemental form of prebiotic fiber as well that you may have seen in supplements. And then lots of foods that we might eat can be rich in prebiotic fiber, and these are the top sources. So snatch that screenshot if you want to. I definitely cited the source down here. And then resistant starch, you won't see on a label. You will see soluble fiber and insoluble fiber on a label for a food in a store. But resistant starch, you just kind of have to know where it is. So interestingly enough, and hardly anybody eats raw potatoes, there's a reason for that, but you can process that raw potato into a potato starch that is excellent for your microbiome as a source of resistant starch. I've been in South America where Green bananas, green plantains are very common. Asia, Southeast Asia as well. We used to bake the plantains and then take them with us and eat them cooled. That's an amazing form of resistant starch. My experience in 9 weeks in Ecuador was I never felt as healthy in my life, or as strong, or as energetic. And I had so much food with resistant starch in it, so much more than I ever would have known to access at the time. And now I understand why I felt so good. So potato salad actually is higher in resistant starch than a baked potato because it's cooled. Same with pasta, same with rice. So like a pasta salad, a bean salad, a rice salad, a potato salad, interestingly enough, the starch changes structure and it becomes prebiotic. Your microbiome digests it better than you, and it gets the benefits. So you can think about that next time you're making potatoes for dinner. You might want to turn it into a potato salad if you want to feed your microbiome better. But you can also source in the store cold processed potato starch, plantain flour, mung bean flour, tapioca flour. These are all available and things that you can literally just add to a smoothie, or add to water, or add to a green juice or greens powder drink, or use in your cooking, add to your oatmeal even. And that's such a great idea. Why am I not doing that? I just come up with these great ideas that I don't even do, you know? Can somebody remind me? Wendy, please write that down and remind me later to add that to oatmeal. It'd be great. So there's lots of ways to get prebiotics in our diet and to supplement it. But the way I think about it is that prebiotics are like the compost for your garden, and probiotic supplements are like a seed. You could compost your garden, like I'm going to compost my garden this year, and in the spring, certain volunteers may come up. So just like that, I could feed my body prebiotics in soluble fiber and resistant starches and see what grows and see if it flourishes. And if I'm generally healthy, that may be enough. A few fermented foods here and there and lots of healthy fibers, that could be enough for a lot of people. But if you have health problems already, you need to plant specific seeds. And that's what probiotic supplements do, is you plant specific strains, specific organisms that will actually grow the right plant, that will actually produce the right nutrients and postbiotics for your health to turn a corner and move in the right direction. So I think of probiotics in a probiotic supplement, especially clinically researched strains like we're going to talk about, as being like coordinates for an aircraft carrier. It takes some time to get that aircraft carrier going into a new direction. You have to input the coordinates, and then you have to fuel it as it makes that slow turn, and then power it forward in that new direction. So this is the relationship between probiotic, clinically researched strain supplements, and the prebiotic fibers and resistant starches. And enzymes are so important, because if you cannot digest your food, not only will your microbiome not get the most out of it, but you will not absorb the nutrients that you need. Your microbes make enzymes as well, but they can't get through everything if you haven't properly digested your food. If you haven't chewed it well, I mean, most of us don't even chew thoroughly because we're in such a hurry, you know. I knew a woman in college who, like, her whole family, they just had this habit of chewing every bite at least 100 times. She drove me crazy. It was terrible to try to eat with her. She was at the table forever, but she was very healthy. So that's your choice. You can also take digestive enzymes. That'll help us, right? When you chew your food too fast, take a digestive enzyme. So we'll talk about enzymes at the end of our kind of list of probiotic supplements. And so in the Dr. Formulated line, we have the full spectrum of support: the prebiotic fiber, the probiotic coordinates, the digestive enzymes to digest your food and break it down enough so that you can benefit and your microbiome can benefit as well. And so a lot of these are coming in both a cooler and a shelf-stable bottle. So the cooler bottle is glass. It is less expensive to produce glass. It tends to be less of a waste product. And our shelf-stable products do go into a plastic container, and it is recyclable, but the plastic container contains a moisture barrier and a desiccant liner that allows the exact same capsule that's in the cooler to be on the shelf and stay dry and stay active and have its full potency. And that's really the only difference. So when we started this line, we worked with Dr. Perlmutter to come up with 9 lactobacillus species strains and 5 bifidobacterium species strains that really covered the gamut of health. Some were good colonizers, some were more transient, some produced postbiotics for other microbes. Some are known to be good for the immune system. Some are known to be better for, normalizing inflammation. Some of them are better for the upper bowel. Some of them are better for the lower bowel. And so all in all, creating a very nice balance in our 9-to-5 blend. And then on top of that, we add the specific targeted clinically researched strain to really make the label claim on that product. Every capsule has potato starch in it, which we talked about. And this is really just to give those microbes something to munch on when the temperature is right, the moisture is right, and the pH is right, and they come out of dormancy and are looking for food like a hungry bear coming out of hibernation. If they don't have something to munch on, they might not make it where they're going, or they might turn on each other. And so you want to make sure that as they come alive again, they have something to consume and start doing what they are designed to do immediately. So it's their brown bag lunch. And that capsule also includes acacia fiber, which we saw at the top of the list of soluble fiber, containing over 90% soluble fiber. And acacia fiber ferments through the entire bowel because it ferments for at least 24 and some people 48 hours. That means it ferments in the small intestine and through the entire large intestine. Fructooligosaccharides, which is a very inexpensive type of prebiotic in a lot of probiotic products, only ferments 4 to 6 hours. So it's really not going to make it more than through the ascending colon and feed organisms there. It will not feed the rest of the way. It will be used up already. So we want something that is long fermenting that, again, will help balance the blood sugar, help create postbiotics that help to increase your nutrients that you get from your probiotics. So the first product that we're going to talk about is the Dr. Formulated Once Daily 30 billion. This is the 9-to-5 blend, the basic blend of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species strains that really cover overall general health in a good daily dose that if you had, a half of a liter of kefir or soured milk or something like that a day, like our agrarian ancestors might have, and people do still around the world, that you might get just that many live organisms. Like 30 billion CFUs is definitely in healthy heapings of sauerkraut, healthy heapings of kimchi. Like in the Korean diet, you have kimchi at every meal, even breakfast. So this is not unusual to get 30 billion live cell units of bacteria that are ready to activate in your body as well. And that is the idea, is supplementing it like you would eat it, and yet have control over which coordinates exactly you're putting into your body. The Once Daily Ultra triples that CFU count. It also, where this 30 billion is lactobacillus heavy, there's more for the upper bowel than for the lower bowel. The Once Daily Ultra is lower bowel heavy. You have a lot more bifidobacteria count, and that means that it's going to be colon specific and is going to be very immune system specific, and that's really what this is for. You have an organism called Lactobacillus acidophilus NCFM, which was a superstar type of acidophilus, most clinically researched acidophilus, the most publications in peer-reviewed scientific journals. It even affects the lower bowel. This is what's interesting. One of the studies showed that it was very useful for lower abdominal pain and distension, gas, and bloating, and yet it colonizes in the small intestine. And so that was sort of a head scratcher. But we now know that things that exist even in the small intestine make postbiotics that feed organisms in the large intestine. And you do not want organisms of the large intestine creeping their way up into the small intestine. That's called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, having things in there that are supposed to be down further, because you ferment things differently in the small intestine than you do in the large intestine. And you have different organisms there than you do in the large intestine. So I love this product for when you feel under the weather, when you have been on an antibiotic and you need to, get back to normal quickly. I love it for food poisoning. I love it for travel. You know, times of year when I'm just trying to support my immune system more, I really lean on this product. The Once Daily Women's is targeted towards women and women's need for floral balance in the urogenital tract. And so there are specific strains that we focus on in this on top of the 9-to-5 blend. So the 9-to-5 blend gives you 14 strains. There are 2 additional strains in here to support female health specifically. It doesn't make you make different hormones. So, you know, spouses and partners of women can take this and not develop female sex characteristics. You know, you don't have to worry about that. It's just that it is specific to the fact that women have a different anatomy than men do. And we are often out of balance in our flora without even realizing it. It just takes stress, a poor diet, you know, a week of swimming and vacation, a new life partner, all kinds of things can just throw it off, not to mention medications like antibiotics. And all of a sudden we're in a tailspin with our flora out of balance. So we tend to, in all of our women's products, always include Lactobacillus rhamnosus and Lactobacillus reuteri for their combined efforts in maintaining adhesion of healthy organisms in the vaginal canal and in the urinary tract, and to inhibit pathogens. Lactobacillus fermentum is also very helpful for mucosal immunity, which means it will not only help the vaginal canal, but also will help the respiratory tract, and that can be good for both women and men. In men, we have a different arrangement of the 9-to-5 blend plus the additional Lactobacillus fermentum to support the concerns of men. And by and large, it's about immune system support, because we know that men are only going to take 1 or 2 of the supplements that you recommend, and you have to hand them to them. I'm half joking, guys. And so we want it to cover all the bases and keep them healthy, even when they don't know that they're being kept healthy. And so it's often a lot about preventing illness, and that is a main focus for the men's Once Daily. These are all great because they're in 1 capsule. You're getting what you need for the day. As we get into the condition specific, now we're talking about 2 capsules at once being the dose that contains the clinically researched amount of ingredients to make the label claim. So urinary tract plus, that is a label claim. And promoting urinary tract health and supporting digestive health, those are label claims. And they are about the organisms and also about the cranberry that goes in here. This is a great product because it is not just cranberry extract, it is actually very special. And we will talk about it, but note that we have the 9-to-5 blend plus the rhamnosus, the reuteri, and we also have the NCFM acidophilus in here instead of only the Lactobacillus acidophilus 14, because we need that extra immune support, extra anti-infective support that NCFM acidophilus gives in a situation like this. You have the Pac-Cran cranberry, and you also have vitamin D in this product. So cranberries have PACs. These have a lot of benefits. Cranberries are a main antioxidant-rich food. They can provide a lot of benefit in a lot of ways. Certain of these PACs inhibit the little legs of E. coli from sticking to anything. So E. coli is very well known to create a biofilm, and it does do that in the urinary tract as well. So if they can't stick, they can't hang on, and they are flushed out, and they cannot create a lasting infection. It turns out that not all the PACs do it. And the research that was done on the cranberry, I'm looking for a little picture, but the research that was done on the cranberry studied the skin, the flesh, the seeds, and the juice separately, and came up with a combination of those 4. All 4 are used, but in different ratios, that focuses on the PACs that actually have this anti-adhesion activity. So this delivers the best anti-adhesion activity for the longest time that you will ever see in a cranberry product. And so they researched it, in cultures, and they researched it in people. So they actually saw the ability of E. coli to be released from sticking and the inability of it to form a biofilm. But what I love is when the actual final extract was studied against cranberry juice and against cranberry extract, other capsules that contain just general cranberry extract, even with higher total PAC count. And you get the same level of adhesion activity, which is here on this axis. So we're coming across this way with a very similar level of anti-adhesion activity in both the PAC-CRAN, which is the red line, and the juice or the extract, which is the blue line. But look at what happens at 10 hours. Juice and extract start to dive in their anti-adhesion activity, whereas this PAC-CRAN remains steady for more than 24 hours. That means you can take your 2 capsules first thing in the morning and leave and go to work and go about your day and not think about it again until the next morning, because it's still preventing them from sticking. And that allows your immune system and the probiotics that are in the product to get a hold of the infection and eliminate it from your body. So this is a great product, both for acute situations, but even better if you know you're prone to recurring urinary tract infections. And it isn't just for women, men get them too, and it is as suitable for a man as it is for a woman. And really, for the most part, the 500 milligrams that are in 2 capsules of the PAC-CRAN was the sweet spot. Taking more than that didn't necessarily lend more anti-adhesion activity or longer anti-adhesion activity. I think if you were really struggling with an acute infection, you know, if you want to take more, you certainly can. I don't think that it can hurt. More probiotics definitely are helpful. But for the long term and for prevention, that 500 milligrams that's in 2 capsules was the sweet spot. Now, for only men, because only men have a prostate gland, this product is very specific, using a different concentration of cranberry, a different formulation, focusing on other parts of the cranberry than are used in PAC-CRAN, and a totally different patent to reduce inflammation in the prostate. And so the study was conducted exactly by the same protocols as the study on the pharmaceutical drug Flomax. And therefore, the 2 studies were able to be compared, which I think is fascinating. So Flomax was researched against placebo, and FlowEnz was researched against placebo, and then you can compare the 2 studies. And so for men, we want to really improve the health in the colon. It's the same for urinary tract infection. You want to improve the health of the part of the digestive tract that is closest to the affected area. And with the prostate, what's going on in the colon absolutely affects the prostate. So if anybody ever says they have a prostate issue, you certainly want to make sure that you're taking a probiotic first and foremost. But for acute symptoms, which have to do with flow rate, very specifically, they were testing the flow rate, the total volume of urine, the steadiness of flow, that it's not intermittent, that it's not cut off, the residual urine left in the bladder. All of these things are measured to determine if the prostate is blocking urine flow through the ureter and through the urethra. And so again, the blue line here was the 500 milligrams, which is in 2 capsules of FlowEnz. The red line was 250 milligrams, so 1 capsule, and then placebo. So in both cases, you got improvement, but the 500 milligrams definitely after 3 months gave the greatest improvement in all of the prostate scores, which were self-reported scores of bathroom habits. Basically, you're getting up in the middle of the night. Is it starting and stopping? After you've already gone, do you feel like you have to go again? And then measurable things like flow rate, total volume, residual volume after urinating left in the bladder. And we saw better improvement versus baseline after 6 months than twice the prescribed amount of the prescription drug Flomax. So I found this study to be fascinating. And you need a probiotic anyway, and the cranberry absolutely can help reduce inflammation and improve flow in the urinary tract for men. And there's just nothing to lose when starting the prostate plus probiotic, and everything to gain. So I just can't even think of a reason why a man would not try this if he were having urinary flow impedance that can be attributed to prostate, which if you're over 40, you can pretty much bet that if you're getting up in the night once or more to urinate, you're probably having impeded flow due to prostatic inflammation. And it starts very small and it grows much larger as we age. The mood probiotic is another one that is, to me, just a fabulous formulation. This came out of the knowledge that the gut and the brain are intimately intertwined, and that if you have anxiety, if you have depression, if you have a poor stress response, not only is it affecting your gut, but your gut is affecting your brain even more. And if we could treat the gut, if we can normalize the microbiome and support a healthy microbiome, we have a better chance of having healthy mental responses as well. And so this is a blend of probiotics to support overall gut health. And then there are two specific strains which were researched in a French study and shown on their own without dietary changes or any therapeutic intervention to improve mental health. There's also ashwagandha and wild blueberry in the product. Again, there's 2 capsules to make a full dose, and they should be taken at once. So these 2 well-documented strains were researched in 2 different clinical trials, and in both what we saw was the relationship between what microbes make and how the brain responds. And so what I found to be so fascinating in the study was that not only was it self-reported subjective surveys, so when we did it, they did like a baseline specific survey that determines mental health. Then they stressed out the participants. I don't know if they showed them the nightly news or what they did, scary pictures, but they stressed them out, and then they repeated the survey. Then they gave them either no probiotic in a placebo capsule, or they gave them these 2 probiotics over a period of 3 weeks, not that long. And then they stressed them again and reevaluated. And so we saw reported changes, so subjective changes, also reported changes in how they felt physically. So diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, gas, bloating, constipation, dry mouth, difficulty swallowing, various things that happen when we're stressed, anxious, or depressed, and saw improvement in the areas of, I think it was gas, bloating, nausea especially. But the thing that really blew my mind is that their free cortisol level, as measured in the urine, came down by 13.5% with just these 2 probiotics alone. And that means that you're helping your body manage the elimination of a stress hormone once the stress is gone, instead of having it recirculating in the body. And so additionally, we added ashwagandha. In 2 capsules, you're getting 300 milligrams of ashwagandha, which is half of the dose that was best researched for stress response and also overall immune and inflammatory response in the body. 300 milligrams a day alone will normalize the cortisol response and not have you overproducing. So I view it as taking the edge off of stress. And as such, when you're not as stressed, you're not as anxious, you have better memory, you have better cognition, you have better ability to recall things. I'm sure we've all experienced that. And ashwagandha, as it manages stress and cortisol production, will obviously manage blood sugar, and managing blood sugar will obviously manage cravings and therefore improve food choices. And that's why we use it in a lot of places. We also are using wild Alaskan blueberries. The main reason, because it's not a lot, is to provide these flavonoids that can help with cognitive functioning in someone in whom stress is creating a lot of ups and downs. And the mental ups and downs in the brain and in the neurology are very damaging. And so you want to have antioxidants that reach the brain on hand to neutralize some of that free radical damage. And so that's really why I see the blueberries as being in there. So what if you are pregnant? What if you just found out you're pregnant and you're not on a probiotic? We wanted to have a product that was perfect for that person, that is in a clinically researched amount, that is appropriate for pregnancy. You do not want to go from not taking a probiotic at all to being pregnant and jump on 90 billion CFUs. Your body will detoxify, and all of that will go right into the placenta and to your fetus. So we don't want to do anything disruptive to the body when we are pregnant. If you've already been on a probiotic, you can stay on it. Absolutely. What you've already been doing with something like a probiotic, that's fine. But if you've never been on one before or haven't been on one recently, this is the safest one to take. And it's very specific with Lactobacillus rhamnosus HN001 to specific research on women taking this during gestation, late gestation, 35 weeks, and finding that their infant for years afterwards had a better and more balanced immune response. So if you have a family history on either side of allergies, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, the spectrum, I would definitely take a probiotic that includes HN001. I absolutely think that it is a very good informer of the immune system, and it's so easy for mom to take a probiotic and have that pass through to the child, both during birth, during gestation, and also during breastfeeding. So keep on your probiotic after delivery and while breastfeeding. It's extremely important. So if you are already on a probiotic and you find out you're pregnant, you can stick on what you're on. If you were not on a probiotic and you find out you're pregnant, this is the best way to go because of the CFU count and the strains. If you're already on a probiotic and you have those kinds of immune dysregulations that lead to the things I mentioned, it might be a good idea to switch to something like this that contains this clinically researched amount of HN001. And that's kind of how I break it down. The kids probiotic also has the 9-to-5 blend, and it emphasizes Lactobacillus gasseri for kids because of immune support, allergies, asthma, chronic rhinitis. Gasseri is amazing for that, and there are specific research studies in kids for that. So this is fabulous because it's chewable, or you can take it like a lozenge. That means that it's delivering strains from the mouth all the way through to the end. They taste delicious. They come in multiple flavors. They also contain vitamin D, vitamin C, and cranberry. So it's a multi-purpose product, and the kid doesn't have to brush their teeth after taking it. In fact, I advise against it. I advise brushing the teeth first, then popping this in their mouth on the way out the door or on the way to bed. And you have multiple flavors. You have the berry and then strawberry, banana, or watermelon. And so let's look at what else is in there and why do kids need a probiotic. So a third of children, at least in the US, are delivered by C-section. I'm not sure how it's going in Canada. It's that bad in Brazil as well, and also in parts of Europe. There's a lot less breastfeeding than there once was, though more than maybe in the 50s, and a standard American diet. And kids, despite, I mean, look at my house. You know I keep my kids on a really good diet, but of course, they're attracted to the things they should not have, and they will have them. And so it's a battle. You have to keep their immune system boosted, their oral health boosted, their digestive health boosted. And I mean, the worst thing that my kids can get is strep throat, because it's one of those areas where I know that if I give them an antibiotic, I'm going to have a struggle getting their immune system back, but they're in so much pain and at so much risk that I feel like I have to. So we get in these conundrums with our children, and we have to do everything we can to help support them have a healthy microbiome until they're adults and on their own. So this is a great tablet because it has 30 milligrams of vitamin C from amla, and it has 400 IUs of D3 and the probiotics and the cranberry, which helps to keep the bad bacteria from sticking to their teeth and in between their teeth. So I view this as a good, oral health product. Have them chew it, have them suck on it. It's preventative for things like strep throat because everything is active right there in the throat, and it's also helping with the nasal passages. So it's right there to prevent any kind of pathogen that's coming in through the nose and through the mouth, which is where things come for kids, right? And you're getting all the benefit of all of these strains, and especially this Lactobacillus gasseri. So love these. And I also recommend these for very elderly people. Like if you have a mother or a father that is maybe still living on their own and you have to go over there and try to arrange their medications and supplements for them, or if they're in assisted living or in a nursing home, this is a great way to get a probiotic in them because they can suck on it or chew it. So it doesn't really matter if they have teeth. They can self-dose. If they get too much, it's not going to cause a problem. It is in a smaller CFU count. So if they're just starting a probiotic, it doesn't shock the system. And it's easy for them to be compliant. And there's really not a reason that a facility like a nursing home would be against you having this in the room with your loved one. One more that I want to talk about in this line, and this is new to you in Canada, and it is a little bit different. It's actually not based on this 9 to 5 blend. We're coming in with specific 11 specific strains to restore the microbiome to health and robustness, and maybe even better than it ever was before, after you've been ill or after you have had an antibiotic or a steroid or another medication that might have knocked out your microbiome. Specifically, you take 2 a day. It is a 14-day program of very high CFU counts and a diversity of strains. All of our strains are resistant to stomach acid and bile, but when we make something that specifically is supportive post or during antibiotic, we know that these strains have already been researched during antibiotic therapy and shown to survive and help you return to a healthy microbiome. So we're getting a lot of Lactobacillus paracasei. It's such a good colonizer of the intestinal lining and a very good inflammation modulator. And we come down here to Bacillus subtilis, which we do not have in any probiotics in Canada other than this one. And it is something you would get from the soil. It is a reset button. To me, it is like amending the soil of your garden or your pasture so that the seeds you plant will be healthier and more robust next year. Bacillus subtilis is something that we would get a lot more of if we actually ate right out of the dirt. So if you're actually going around picking up chicory root in your yard and eating it, or going in the garden and eating things right out of the garden, taking carrot and wiping it off on your plants and eat your plants and eating it. This is something we've always interacted with as humans until recently. And it is such a good amender of the gut, of the environment of the gut, to create the right situation for all of the other strains to thrive. And this strain is known to directly interact with the lining of the gut where immune system cells are housed and inform your blood-mediated immune system of what is self and what is non-self. So it is a good trainer for the immune system. So this Restore product is really exciting to have on the shelf. And then finally, as promised, I want to talk about how you digest the food that you take in. Again, if you're not digesting your food well, not only will you not get the nutrients that you deserve, your vitamins, your minerals, your trace minerals, your antioxidants, but your microbiome will not have as much to utilize to produce good things for you. So if certain foods bother you, an enzyme can be a hack. If you love eggplant parmigiana and it always gives you heartburn, an enzyme can help, but that doesn't mean you should have that dish every day if it already bothers you and you don't digest it well. These are great because they're chewable. You can take 1 or 2 at a time. They're great, again, for elderly. They're great for children because they're chewable. They're rich in papain, which is a protein digester, but they have all of the enzymes you would need to digest fats, carbs, and proteins. This is the first time anybody ever came out with a non-GMO project verified digestive enzyme. Why? Because enzymes are made through fermentation. You get microorganisms to produce the enzymes. And typically, historically, either a microorganism has been genetically manipulated to produce something, like how insulin is made by a bacteria that's been genetically engineered, or you're feeding the microbes genetically modified food in the fermentation medium, which negates the non-GMO seal. So this is the first time ever that a full spectrum of digestive enzymes was brought together, and their fermentation medium for producing them was entirely non-GMO. So no GMO beet, no GMO corn, no GMO soy. You have to choose products, food products to feed these microbes and ferment them that are not from genetically modified origin. We did that. We also have so much real food, 29 different fruits and vegetables that are enzyme rich in here, and that allows us to maintain the certified organic seal. And it is a vegan product, not animal-derived enzymes. And yet, much to my surprise, when we first came out with this, it is very effective. We only have this enzyme in the house now, and we always have it around. We have it around for friends, for family, for us. It's such an amazing product. And anecdotally, a lot of people in the years that this has been out has said it's really good for upper GI stuff. If you get sour stomach, a little heartburn, a little reflux in between meals, after meals, This is really good for that kind of a situation. It's not as good if an hour after a meal you're still feeling heavy. Sometimes you need to have a time release capsule for that, so it makes it down into the small intestine. This is really good right after the meal. Or independent of eating, if you're feeling some heartburn, it really can help. If I had had this when I was pregnant with my kids, I would have been so happy, because once I got really big, I couldn't digest anything, and I just needed something in the upper GI to speed it out of my stomach and get it out of the way of my bulging belly, right? So this is a great product, and it's wonderful to have around these days. So this whole line is absolutely specific coordinates for the aircraft carrier that is your health to turn it in the right direction. Clinically studied strains, very condition specific, dairy-free and hypoallergenic, non-GMO project verified, and you're getting all of this prebiotic fiber and resistant starch to fuel these probiotics as they come alive in your system and give them a head start. Now, we hope you will go out and eat foods that make them flourish. That way you can get more bang for your buck. I always want you to eat the right foods, but even if you didn't, it's better to have this than not. If you're going to go on and eat Tim Hortons or McDonald's every day, at least you're taking a probiotic. I'll give you that, but I would really encourage you to try to think about your microbiome when you eat, shop for your microbiome, and nourish it as much as possible. So I thank you all very much for joining me, and I do want to rely on my very good friend Wendy to moderate the Q&A, and I'm going to come back on with my face at risk.
Thank you so much, Amber. That was fabulous. The first thing I just want to clarify for one individual here who's regarding, question was regarding dairy. Can you just clarify the aspect that probiotics are not dairy-based?
Okay, and actually I'm going to go back and show you one that is an exception and why. So you can have probiotics that are fermented in dairy. So we have a line called raw probiotics that is kefir and yogurt based, but you cannot leave that dairy in there. You have to separate the probiotics from the dairy because the dairy is not preserved. And so it is no longer, hardly any probiotic out there would still be in dairy unless it were a liquid or a yogurt or something like that. But for labeling clarity, we have to clarify if something was fermented in dairy or soy or gluten, because those are common allergens. So this entire line was never fermented in dairy, soy, or gluten, with the exception of these two strains, the Lactobacillus helveticus and Bifidobacterium longum. We cannot claim as dairy-free because they came from a different laboratory, and their fermentation medium seems to include some dairy. They are no longer on the dairy, but that statement has to be made. And so there's many reasons we don't have a vegan seal on probiotics, but we say vegetarian. Partly because these are human strains, you cannot call them vegan. There's changes happening in the vegan world around that, and we're getting somewhere with that. But the other reason for this particular one is that it is fermented in dairy and therefore cannot be called a vegan product. So I hope that helps to answer the question and the one I anticipated.
This is an individual who is, looks like they're just starting the second trimester, and they started taking a woman's blend of probiotics. So they've done a couple of boxes now at this point at a 50 billion level. Would it be more suitable for them to switch to something at a lower dose in a pregnancy blend, or continue with the 50 billion at this point?
Right. So as I emphasized, if your body is used to that 50 billion, there's no danger with you going forward with that. And it's very beneficial. It's great that you were already on it when you got pregnant. That's ideal. That's what we really want, is for people to be on a probiotic even before they're thinking about getting pregnant, right? So the question then is, with the Lactobacillus rhamnosus HN001, which very specifically helps to inform the immune system of your child and carries on whether you breastfeed or not into their infancy and early childhood. So if you or your partner have a family history of immune dysregulation that manifests in dermatitis, allergies, asthma, eczema, or even anything, well, that is part of the autism spectrum, but even anything going further out like that into autism or Asperger's, I would consider either adding the prenatal in and cycling it in, or switching to it simply to get that HN001 in your body and working with your immune system, and therefore affecting the immune system of your child even after they're born. So it really depends on what your family history is. Me, with my kids, I knew that my partner had problems with eczema and allergies and a family history of asthma. If I had had this, I would have been hitting it hard. We didn't have it at that time.
I am an individual who drinks things like raw milk kefir, along with a diet rich in things like nuts, pineapples, cranberries, blueberries. Is raw kefir going to provide me most of the ingredients that you've mentioned in your Garden of Life products, or is a probiotic still going to be necessary? So it really depends on your stress level, the rest of your lifestyle, and any health conditions that you might have. And if this is a commercial kefir or one that you're making at home, when you make it at home, we tend to get a lot more diversity of microorganisms. I just don't really know how you're sourcing it, but what we used to make at home, so we make a yogurt out of local goat milk at home, and that's going to be extremely rich in diversity and potency. And if you're making it the way our ancestors did, then it could be adequate. And if you're drinking enough of it, you know, you're going to need probably 16 ounces of it a day. That could be adequate. But given greater stressors, or you've been sick, or you go on an antibiotic or a steroid, you may want to do a probiotic to augment that. I am all for you being on a good diet and eating fermented foods. This is how we should all be heading, to that point where we can coast. I get to a point with my health and probiotics and diet where I'm kind of coasting on my diet, my antioxidants, my fiber. But if I have to take an antibiotic or a medication, or I get really stressed, I may have to take a probiotic for a period of time. So I just gauge by how you're feeling. If you are still having digestive issues, if you are still having skin issues, if you're having immune issues, the kefir may not be cutting it for you. And then you might want to choose a probiotic for something stronger for a period of time. The next question is regarding children. What would you suggest for an individual who is 1.5 years, so a small child? Is something like the children's probiotic suitable?
So the main reason it's not suitable is that it is choking hazard. So I imagine that made me choke just saying it. So I imagine that you are considering breaking that up for your child. 5 billion CFU is absolutely a normal amount for a toddler. We do have in the US a kid's product that is 5 billion CFU, but it's a powder. So I have to kind of leave that at your discretion. I think that the safety is there, but the delivery system is not for a 1.5-year-old. And that's the main reason that we have to put that on the box. So at your discretion, I think that if you crushed it up entirely and included it in a drink, that it would be okay. And, you know, I always gauged with my kids on when they could fully chew something. That was kind of when I gauged whether or not they could take it.
I'm an individual in my 50s and in the midst of menopause. I'm dealing with things like bloating and constipation as well as anxiety. Is something like a probiotic useful in my situation?
Absolutely. In fact, it's probably a first line defense. And it's unfortunate that we come to these things late. You know, we come to them, if we had started long ago, the transition of menopause might not be so arduous. You know, the cortisol patterns that lead to bloating and weight gain around the middle, and changes in our skin and changes in our mood and difficulty in managing stress might not be as severe. So absolutely would say get on a probiotic. I absolutely, in most cases, I think that the mood is really good for that. Some women in menopause don't do great with ashwagandha. Many women do very well with ashwagandha. Not knowing you, I can't really say which you would be, but I guarantee that when you take the ashwagandha, you will know if it's not good for you. It will make you more testosterone dominant, and you'll feel like a little bit of a madman. And you would probably know right away. So you could give it a test. But the mood probiotic is great for anybody who's stress, cortisol production, their anxiety around that, their mood dysregulation is then creating imbalances in the gut, and you get into a vicious cycle. So the stress, the hormonal changes, they cause the bloating and the gas and discomfort in the gut, and then it goes a bigger conversation back to the brain. So I love the mood probiotic for that. If you're already on any kind of herbal support and you don't want to bring in the ashwagandha, then you could focus on like the women's once daily, or even hit it hard for a while with the once daily ultra. But again, the mood probiotic with the Lactobacillus helveticus and Bifidobacterium longum was actually researched in women, and women who were having difficulty with their stress response. And that very well describes what happens to us in menopause. So it would certainly be one I would aim for. It kind of depends on what your health history was. If you've had a lot of antibiotics in your life and never really replenished, doing a course of the Restore and then going to mood might be a great idea, because you might want to really beef up your microbiome with something like Restore for 14 days, 2 weeks, and then head into something more specific to clearing that cortisol out of your system. Good luck. And fiber. Get a resistant starch product, a fiber product, and work up to it. Start with teaspoons, but work up to 2-3 tablespoons of that a day to help clear out those toxic hormones from your system. Because even if you didn't have birth control pills or haven't done hormone therapy, you are getting it in your water, you're getting it in your food without even knowing it. And so we have to clear that out in order to have a clear picture moving into menopause of what our bodies are capable of. And fiber will do that.
We have one more question, and I want to be sure to get your perspective on it because it includes a condition that's a very hot topic right now. So this individual is dealing with bloating, gas, abdominal pain, dyspepsia, also rosacea, as well as symptoms of SIBO. Are probiotics suitable in this situation?
Yes, until you got to SIBO. So as you may know, if you've done some research, if you suspect that you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is the things that are supposed to be in your large intestine, being in your small intestine, oftentimes probiotics and fiber supplements make it worse in the short term until you've gotten rid of the bacteria in the small intestine that aren't supposed to be there. So it's all fine to have bifidobacteria, but if they're in the wrong place, they will overgrow because of all of the food that is available to them in the small intestine, and they will cause distress because they're fermenting where they're not supposed to be. So SIBO is tough, and it really requires the help of a healthcare practitioner, both for testing. I think the breath test is one of the best ways to test for SIBO. If you can rule it out, then yes, moving ahead with probiotic and prebiotic support is a really good idea. If you have SIBO, you usually get help from a practitioner getting a specific antimicrobial that stays in the gut to knock down those microbes that are in the wrong place. And later you can move forward with specific probiotic supplementation. Now that Bacillus subtilis is good in all cases. So that is one, that soil-based organism, if you can access it, that is very good for all things considered. If you wanted to give it a try with Bacillus subtilis, maybe doing one of the Restore capsules instead of 2 and see how you feel might be a good way to start if you don't have access to a practitioner and testing and all of the above.
A couple more questions just popped in, Amber. So this individual has exhausted several treatments and they deal with heavy periods. Are probiotics something that would be useful?
It would not be direct, but absolutely if you do not have a healthy microbiome and the colonic flora is not healthy, you will be absorbing unhealthy, improperly converted hormones into your reproductive system, and that will cause reproductive system imbalances. So they are related, but it's not like taking the probiotic directly is going to change how your uterine lining forms and how you shed it. It will change your hormones over time. So absolutely getting on a probiotic feeding diet and getting certain probiotics into your system, you know, those things which help the floral balance remain correct will also help the hormone conversion to be correct. So I would focus on something that is made for women, like the Women's Once Daily or the Urinary Tract Plus, with those specific strains that are really helpful for maintaining vaginal floral balance, urogenital system balance, because that will then prevent pathogenic toxins from entering your reproductive system and creating more dysregulation.
Thank you so much, Amber. This was full of so much important information. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us for this last hour for our presentation on probiotics. As they can often come up, if you do have a question following this presentation, after you've been able to digest some of Amber's information, please do not hesitate to reach out to me with additional questions at webinar@gardenoflifecanada.com. Again, that is webinar@gardenoflifecanada.com. So again, thank you so much, Amber. Thank you to all of you, and I hope all of you have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Bye, Amber.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.